Imagine this scenario. You have just gone missed after your second instrument approach and the weather minimums at your filed alternate have deteriorated to half-a-mile visibility with 500-foot ceilings. You have low fuel and must land as soon as possible. You declare a fuel emergency and ATC clears you for the ILS approach into runway 20. You have to execute this next instrument approach successfully or the consequences could be dire. Obviously, this is an extreme scenario, and being faced with having to execute an instrument approach in near zero visibility would be a worst-case scenario for any pilot. Hopefully, a pilot never encounters an emergency such as this, but it could happen, and practicing low visibility instrument approaches in the simulator can make you a safer pilot. In this video we will attempt to shoot an ILS approach flying the Cessna 172 with the Garmin G1000 in a low visibility snowstorm where the visibility was 2 statute miles. This is the Garmin G1000 electronic flight display. We have tuned the second navigation frequency to the ALWVOR frequency of 116.4. We will be flying the ILS approach into runway 20 at Walla Walla Regional Airport in Southeast Washington. We have also set the localizer frequency for this ILS approach of 111.7 into the first navigation frequency on the G1000. We can toggle between the GPS, VOR and localizer needles by pressing the CDI button at the bottom of the flight display as shown. Since this ILS approach requires DME, we have programmed the DME equipment, also called distance measuring equipment, which will show our distance from the ALWVOR. Once we have completed our pre-takeoff checklist and get our takeoff clearance from ATC, we will begin our takeoff. Notice we are about 6 nautical miles from the ALWVOR, as shown by the DME in the top left. The DME can also be found at the bottom of the G1000 electronic flight display. We just departed from Martin Field and are flying to Walla Walla Regional Airport. After briefing the ILS approach, we notice a few things. The approach course is 202. The initial fix of Rio is 12.3 nautical miles from the ALWVOR and the minimum altitude at Rio is 4,600 feet. The final approach fix of Kosovo is 7.2 nautical miles from the ALWVOR and the minimum altitude at Kosovo is 3,200 feet. The final approach fix is where we will intercept the localizer and follow the glide path down to our minimum descent altitude of 1,394 feet. If we are unable to see the runway by the missed approach point, we will need to go missed. According to FAR 91.175 Section C, we will not be able to descend below the minimum descent altitude unless 3 requirements are met. The first is that we must be able to make a descent to landing on the runway using normal maneuvers and a normal descent rate. The second is that the flight visibility must meet or exceed the required minimums for the approach. Third, we must be able to distinctly identify one of the approved visual references for the runway, also called the runway environment. We have just passed Kosovo and are now established on the localizer. We are maintaining a descent rate of 500 to 600 feet per minute and are trying to keep the localizer needle centered. We are about to cross Hivop, which is 4 miles from the ALWVOR and 3 nautical miles from the edge of runway 20. Our current altitude is 2,700 feet, which is above the minimum altitude at Hivop of 2,400 feet. Finally, we get visual sight of the runway lights for runway 20 in the distance. We are above the glide path since the green diamond is below the center line as illustrated on the G1000 flight display. We will need to decrease our descent rate to get back on the glide path. Notice as we fly to the left of the runway the needle deflects to the right, meaning we need to fly back to the right and fly towards the needle to get back on the glide path. As we fly back to the right towards the needle, the localizer needle will start to center as we get back on course. We have reduced our airspeed to 70 knots and have extended the flaps 20 degrees. We are facing a strong crosswind from the right and are crabbing into the wind to stay centered on the localizer. One important point to mention as we make our final approach. Our airspeed has dropped to about 62 knots and we need to be careful to manage our speed and not approach at too slow of an airspeed and risk a stall. The stall speed for a Cessna 172 with flaps fully extended is about 40 knots and we are currently at about 60 knots but need to keep this in mind and add power to keep our airspeed up if need be. We have completed our before landing checklist and are just about to touch down at Walla Walla Regional. On this flight, we were able to spot the runway lights to runway 20 about 3 miles out, which is well above the minimums for this approach. The runway visual range for this ILS approach is 2,400 feet, which is just under 1/2 mile. Thank you for watching the video. Please like the video and subscribe for more educational videos on flight training and aviation topics.